Hello there, my name is Reese Carey, and this is my gameplay demonstration of Firewall VR, my development project. Firewall VR is a VR-based game where it is a defense-style game where you must defend a last line of defense from waves of oncoming enemies, which get procedurally more difficult. Now, there are two main aspects to Firewall VR: the reactive artificial intelligence within the game, as well as the accessibility of VR. Now, accessibility of VR has been handled with things such as motion blur around the edges of the VR headset, as well as certain development design decisions, such as the length of the game being relatively short, as well as minimal movement of the character themselves, as these all accumulate to help reduce motion sickness and make Firewall VR a very accessible title to new virtual reality players. Another aspect of virtual reality was the user interface, which, as you can see, things such as the health and remaining ammunition are tied to the guns, and create more living game world, a more immersive game world, instead of a set user interface at the bottom of the screen or something. Now, the artificial intelligence within the game world get more difficult as the game progresses, and start displaying different behaviors based on different aspects of the game, such as the time that has been elapsed, their remaining health, their current location, whether the player is looking at them or whatnot. Many different aspects of the game which increase the intelligence of the enemies within the game world. Now, here we see the start menu. We have start, controls, options and quit. These are all fully functional. The controls have a brief overview of the game as well as the controls. Select A to use the menus, A or B or the trigger buttons to fire, and to reload you must rotate. Now, the options, we have a graphics menu, and we were using Ultra for the purpose of this demonstration, as well as a volume mixer which changes values of the master volume within the game world. Now, if we start here, you can see the game world. It's very brightly lit, it is very accessible, it's very open, it's very easy to see everything. It's a very immersive game world, and there is the time elapsed across the back wall, where the timer is slowly counting down until the end of the game. Here you can see the two most basic form of enemies. We have the walking enemies and the running enemies. In their most basic form, the walking and running enemies just progress along the Z-axis towards the player. The running enemies move faster and have more health. This is their most basic form, and we'll start displaying more interesting behaviours as the game progresses based on different parameters. Here you can see that the second behaviour has kicked in based on the time elapsed, and there's also a third enemy type within the game world now. As you can see, the running enemy is now rotating a set amount at set intervals, making them harder to hit, therefore making the game more difficult, as well as the walking enemies are warping along the x-axis. These react based on things such as the time elapsed and also their current position, as they can only warp within certain parameters along the x-axis. Now, the third enemy within the game is that of the flying enemy, which hovers and progresses towards the character's current location to deal damage. And when the flying enemy, when the health has dropped below a certain threshold, the flying enemy will enter a kamikaze state, where it travels towards the player's transform at a heightened speed. Here you can also see the power-ups on the floor, which slow or ground units. As you can see there, the speed of the enemy walking and running, the walking and running enemies has been slowed. And here you can see the kamikaze attack and the damage that has been dealt to the player. So here you can see that the flying enemy reacts based on missing health. We have enemies behaving differently based on the time elapsed, as well as their current position on, say, the X transform. And now we can also see the third behaviour of the running enemy. Once the health of the running enemy has been diminished by a certain amount, when it's below a certain threshold, it will begin to scale down, making it harder to hit and the game more difficult. And here we can see the turret enemy, which is the fourth kind of enemy within the game world, which spawns after a set time. Now the turret enemy has many interesting features, such as it shoots cannonballs at you at timed intervals, and I missed that one, so more damage has been dealt to the player. The turret enemy fires at the player at set intervals. As well as certain specific elements that are specific to the turret. So if you look at the turret, you can tell that it has now turned blue, which acts as a sort of freezing capability of the turret, meaning the turret cannot shoot if the player is looking at it, which reacts based on the player's current looking transform using a ray cast. Now if you deal enough damage to the turret, it will malfunction and it will fire upon its allies for a set amount of time. And here we can actually see the boss level and also the final type of enemy within the game world, the shielding enemy. If damage is dealt to the boss's shield while the shielding enemy is alive, the boss will regenerate shield. Now, the boss has a few very interesting gameplay mechanics. The more damage you deal to it, the more frequently you destroy its shield, the more frequently it will spawn enemy types, and the closer to the player the boss will get. So the longer that it takes for you to deal with the boss, the harder the boss will be overall. So after a set amount of time, the boss's shield will regenerate after you deplete it. You can see the more damage that is dealt to the boss, the closer the boss will actually get to the player, making the spawns more difficult to deal with, as well as it will spawn enemies more frequently, adding to the artificial intelligence of the boss, as well as the progressive difficulty. And there we go. Firewall VR has been completed. You have won. These menus are fully functional. If we were to go back to, if we were to restart, it would restart us to the beginning of the game. If we were to go back to the main menu, like so, we are back to the start menu of Firewall VR. So yes, thank you for watching my gameplay demonstration.